Good morning. We'll just give Baz the opportunity to let in some of the participants, and then we'll kick off. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to those joining us online, and also to the many that will be accessing this recording of today's session across the whole APSCo family. So we're going to be joined by people from APSCo UK, Germany, Australia, Southeast Asia, and APSCo Outsource via the recording that we'll make available to all of our members worldwide. Before I hand over to speakers, I've got an APSCo update to share. It's a little while in the future, but we've just fixed the dates for our planned trade delegation to New York in June next year. So APSCo have been running trade delegations for over 20 years now, and we take our members to destinations all over the world, anywhere that they're considering opening up offices, and we tend to respond to demand. So at the moment, as the largest staffing market in the world, the US is experiencing growth still, though staffing market at the moment is a little bit flat. There's a lot of demand still for our members to consider opening up in the States. So last September, we were over in Austin, in Texas, and Miami, Florida. And next June, we're planning to do 3 days in New York. So that'll be an intensive 3-day program of seminars. Delegates will receive everything they need to make an informed decision about opening up in the US and in New York. And we culminate the 3-day session in a panel where you'll meet 5 senior directors from APSCo member companies already operating in the New York area. Also, as we mentioned in today's agenda, we're considering taking members to some of the destinations that we'll be covering today, such as the Philippines and India. That will be on demand. And if you're interested in more information on those locations or any of the international support that APSCo and APSCo Global provide, please contact Baz. She'll share her details in chat. We have 150 partners worldwide. We've got a great network. There's lots of international services, not just the US, but across the globe. And we can signpost, introduce you to contacts, as well as give you direct services and support when you're already operating in a location, but if you're considering expanding into it. So moving on to today's session, offshoring and outsourcing. So a warm welcome and thank you to our speakers from QX Global. It's Akhilesh Pandey, from TMF, Ed Dixon, and from IMS Group, Julie. I like the waves. Julie, we need a wave there. After the presentation, we'll have time for some Q&A. If you do have any questions, please post these via chat or the Q&A function. For housekeeping, copy of the slides and additional content from the speakers will be circulated following today's session. So there's no need to make totally comprehensive notes because you'll be getting a lot of content from the guys following the session. So with the housekeeping out of the way, I'll pass straight over to QX Global. So Akhilesh, over to you if you can kick off.
Thank you, Stuart, and good morning, good afternoon, good morning, evening to everyone joining from across the world. I'm Akhilesh Pandey, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer with QX Global Group. And to kickstart, I will start sharing my screen now. Cool. So that's my little intro. Chief Customer Officer with QX Global Group. I have been in outsourcing all my life, about 22 years since I started working. And last 14 to 15 years, particularly in recruiting and staffing outsourcing, working with customers in the UK, US, and Australian region. I've personally been engaged and involved with over 100 customers setting up their offshore and outsourced units in India and in Mexico across all of these years. And a quick introduction of QX. So QX has been in business about 21 years, founded in 2003. And very interestingly, actually was a fallout of a joint venture with a recruiting business in the UK that had a joint venture with our ex-chairman, Chris Robinson. And they went out to India to scale up the business and use the opportunity by using the cost arbitrage, the talent arbitrage, availability of people to work across various different shift hours, and have a larger working operational window. That allowed them to scale up the business. It was sold, and that template was used to then build a whole service package around it, which is QX Global today with 3,500 people working across 6 different offices in India. And we have other offices in the US, in the UK, in Australia, and also a delivery center in Mexico. Our solutions involve working with recruitment businesses and supporting with their front office functions, their middle office functions like compliance and admin. Front office is mainly recruitment support, which is recruiting, candidate side of things, the client side of things, all the resourcing activities and stuff. And also the back office, which is finance and accounting, mainly pay and bill functions, management accounting, all of credit control and Power BI dashboarding for management information. Additionally, in last few years, we have built capabilities within automation because we have seen the demand that people want to make their processes more efficient, run them throughout the week, 24 hours a day. And we built our proprietary tools within automation that automate a lot of functions within recruitment, whether it is front office, middle office, or back office. Plus, our service offering also include digital transformation for recruitment businesses. And as a product offering, we have a full-fledged CRM, which has got capabilities from onboarding a candidate, putting them out to work, and pay them. So this is a full-scale CRM system from onboarding to the payment to the candidates. So that's QX. So before I cover the content that I put together for this webinar today, I want to set the context. And the context is, while outsourcing has been a great tool for cost arbitrage in all of these years, I think it has lately become a great tool to also leverage the talent arbitrage. And that is a lot to do with the demographic changes that we are seeing, and it is going on quite rapidly. In our world, we call it a demographic time bomb with aging population in certain parts of the world that will put a lot of pressure for them to use the global talent pool across various different regions of the world. And I'll just present a quick video with just about a minute, which will showcase how the demographic shift's gonna take place and how it has actually taken place from 1990 until today, and what it is gonna look like in 2050, sorry. So what you see here is those dark green circles are mainly very young age population. The light green circles or bubbles are people who are within their working age. And the lighter green and the yellows are people where the populations are mostly on the higher age side or really aging population. And this spreads across 1990 to 2050. So what you're seeing here are major shifts happening in the Western world, especially if you look at UK, Europe, and you look at Northern America, and you look at some parts of Japan and Asia. What you will see is over a period of next 20 to 25 years, these geographies will have a lot of aging population and will have issues getting talent from their own markets, which would mean they will depend on geographies like India, some parts of Asia, Africa, and Mexico to fulfill the demands of talent. So this clearly tells us that it is not just the cost arbitrage and operational arbitrage, it is also a very, very strong talent arbitrage that comes into the play now. So in the run-up to this, we did some analysis because there are a lot of options and there are a lot of regions that actually offer a lot of competitive advantage within outsourcing and offshoring. And we are going to look at only 3 markets here because we don't have all day. So India, Philippines, and South Africa is what we're looking at. So India has the global domination with 55% of the global outsourcing market, while Philippines holds about 15%. South Africa is the emerging market with about 2% market cap today. But we have seen South Africa picking up a lot of interest, mainly from businesses within the UK and European regions, while India picks up interest from global players. Philippines, again, a global interest from businesses across the world, but more for American region. And the clearest perspective of the industry size will give us a bit more hint on how the markets are and what are the different parameters and the dynamics that play up here. So India is projected to go up to 99 to 105 billion by 2030, presently about 64.6 billion in 2024 as the revenue from outsourcing and offshoring. BPO industry, on the other hand, in Philippines has did 37.8 billion in 2024. And South Africa, still a very young market, about 1.89 to 2 billion in 2024. I think what this tells us is, while Philippines holds 15% of the market share against India, which is 55%, their revenues as of today are very close to 50% of what India is clocking in. Now, in a nutshell, that tells me that the fee structure and the cost of operating offshore market and models in Philippines is much higher compared to India. So there is a cost arbitrage to be derived, but it is not as strong as it is in India. But they have got the benefits of having better cultural alignment, better American English per se, and other skill sets. And if you come to the talent pool, India produces over 9 million graduates annually, and about 70% of those are English-speaking graduates. Philippines, on the other hand, has got 700,000 graduates annually, and South Africa about 200,000 graduates annually. Cost competitiveness, we have done some research, and we have also looked at a lot of data using several industry bodies and their publications. India offshoring delivers up to 60% compared to the Western country, kind of cost saving for them and the cost arbitrage, while Philippines delivers about 30 to 50% cost savings, and South Africa around 40% cost savings. We also wanted to present what are different options if you're looking for offshoring and outsourcing. So first one is a pure vanilla outsourcing model. You find a service provider that are right to work with. They've got all the protocols, the measures and the credentials and everything that you can work with to ensure that data is protected, services never broken down, and they can deliver the job, which is pretty seamless and smooth because this model is used by majority of the players that outsource, and your partners are responsible for delivering the solution while you have the responsibility of supporting them. Then there's another model which has seen interest of the market in some cases, but not very widely used. But this probably is much more meaningful if there are businesses which are very large in size and looking to scale up to really large numbers in choice of location. So this is a collaborative or build, operate, transfer model where you choose a provider to build it up, to set it up, to build it up, get to the learning curve, and when it is mature, hand it over. That kind of reduces your risk by doing it all yourself without knowing the local markets, without knowing the jurisdictions and stuff like that. And the third one is captive model, where businesses choose to build everything in an offshore location or in an outsourced location all by themselves. This requires a lot of time investment. It can have a lot of challenges around the bandwidth and the understanding of the jurisdiction, the local laws, the labor laws, and a lot of other stuff. And in many cases, depending on the geography and the political stability and various other factors, exits we have seen could be a bit challenging when businesses are looking to exit that investment in those countries. So that's primarily three different models to choose from, depending on what your priorities are, what your needs are. These could be the potential models to choose from primarily. There's a quick one, mainly on the compliance with regards to information security, data security, the parameters, the audits, and reliability of a partner. So it is very apparent that in recruitment business, we put people at the core of it. Your candidates, your clients, and all the information related to them is of utmost importance because that's what actually runs the business. It is very important to choose a right partner which has got the framework to be able to protect all your data, and it has to reflect in all the legal contract that you do with them. So the due diligence and the assessment of the contract, I think, should absolutely be very, very critical. And accreditations like ISO, ISMS, GDPR for UK European regions, and the IT infrastructure and information security plays a very important role. There may be hundreds of those smaller businesses that do not have these kind of infrastructure, and that can pose the risk of data loss. And I think most businesses would never want to get there. And that's the compliance angle of it. And to summarize all of this, offshoring as a solution can also be used as a succession plan for growing the business, scaling the business, bringing efficiencies up. So first thing is global talent access. So of course, we are going to move from local talent to global talent, and that's not going to be a choice, but a mandated requirement because the world's demography is changing very, very quickly, and we will find it very challenging to recruit people in certain geographies. And there are the rest of the world which is promising enough to bring talent into the global market. So that is acceptable if you have an established model and a partnership or your own offshoring strategy. Risk mitigation, because there are a lot of factors that play, and they can kind of pose risk for the business. Now, one such angle is, employment liabilities, the whole process of redundancies, and the painful exits, and these kind of, limitations, which kind of are scary and are very, very destructive to deal with. In an offshore environment or in a partnership of offshoring and outsourcing, that risk is mitigated almost 100% because the redundancy and exits are pretty simple, and you don't have the liabilities to go through the processes that you have to go through in your own regions and countries. It is primarily the providers or the partners' responsibility to manage that, and you can scale up or scale down depending on how the business cycles are. And in the world that is full of uncertainties today because of cost of money going up, inflation going up, interest rates going up, wars happening around the world, I think the uncertainties are probably at a level that we have not seen in the past. And I don't think this is all going to change anytime soon, and it can actually get worse. So risk mitigation is an important factor, which offshoring and outsourcing can also help you address in certain ways. And of course, a scalable solution. A lot of clients that I speak with personally, I mean, I have seen them struggling to fulfill their missed opportunities just because they can't recruit people well enough, well fast enough. So challenge is if they've got the opportunities and they can deliver to those opportunities and they need more people, that becomes their ceiling. An offshore model, especially in the market that brings right talent and right magnitude of the talent pool, you can actually address that issue. And once it is set up, scaling up is absolutely simple. Now, there's one question I get asked a lot of times with regards to cost efficiency. Now, cost efficiency is not just the fee structure. Cost efficiency also means the productivity that is delivered in the solution like this. In my view, if we compare an offshore solution or an outsourced solution with performance of the people who have been in the business, who are key to the business for years, that's probably a bit unfair because it takes time to build up. Once it is built up, you don't necessarily need to have superstars in the business billing hundreds and thousands. Even if you've got people who are delivering 10K, 20K, 30K, or 5K, or 6K, but the cost is really low, and you have an operational profit in that model, scaling up kind of brings in that kind of magnitude in the business volumes, and you can scale it up very quickly. And cost efficiency also means how can you leverage technology and automation to improve the output of each individual involved in the business. So that's in a nutshell 4 various pillars that can actually be the foundation of the whole planning around offshoring and outsourcing. That's the end of my presentation. I was asked to finish it in 10 minutes, and I think I kept the time well. Thank you. So, Stuart, I'll hand it over back to you. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks, Kailesh. Appreciate your timekeeping there. We'll swiftly pass over to Ed if you're ready to go.
All good. Hopefully my screen is coming through. Very nice to be here today. I'll just give you a little bit of background on me and our organization, just to try and set the scene. Sorry, I just seem to be having some trouble changing the slide. There we go. Yeah, so I'm Ed Dixon. I suppose I've been sat in the shoes, probably many of you are sat in. That was back in 1997, where I was working for an insurance business that was looking at outsourcing options, and in the end decided to set up its own what was called captive operation in Bangalore. I've since spent a good amount of time in the outsourcing space, and actually moved to India in 2011 to set up a business that supported organizations seeking to work in the market. We split that business and sold part of it to TMF Group earlier this year. So I've sat on both sides of this conversation. Let me just tell you a little bit more about TMF quickly. So TMF, we're essentially in the business of helping organizations expand and manage their international footprint, very much from the administrative side of things. So our expertise would be applicable for those of you that are wanting to set up your own offshore center. We have teams in 87 countries globally. So in that sense, we're kind of country agnostic. We can support you wherever you may wish to set up. In terms of the type of support we're offering, we cover what we call global entity management. So that's helping set up and manage legal entities in a particular market or in multiple markets. The second area is HR and payroll. So managing the regular payroll and so on for your team overseas, and HR, of course. And the third around accounting and tax. So all the local bookkeeping and tax compliances and so on. That's our kind of core area of strength. What I'm going to do is focus a large chunk of my conversation around a study that we perform every year, where we look at 70 odd countries across 250 data points per country to try and assess complexity of countries against one another. For those of you that are good with QR codes, it's accessible through our website and freely available, allows you to dive into a bit of the data. So what I'm going to do is just take a selection of countries and just sort of have a little bit of a look at the type of analysis that it can give you. So on the left-hand side there, a low number means complex, a larger number means less complex. So Mexico in that on the left side would be viewed as much more complex than, say, South Africa. And as you assess in the tool, as an example, if you take the extremes here, you can see that rules, regulations, and penalties in Mexico are very high versus, say, South Africa, which are reasonably low. So this will allow you to, one of the criteria that you might look at when you're selecting a country would be the relative complexity of operating there. If I go on to the next slide, that then takes the same three countries that Akhilesh focused on earlier, so Mexico, Poland, and South Africa, and then had a little look at the underlying complexity. And so even though, for example, South Africa scores very positively on a number of areas, then the penalties and liabilities is reasonably high. Conversely, if you look at Mexico, actually Mexico scores pretty well on penalties and liabilities and corporate representation. So there'll inevitably be pluses and minuses when you're looking at one market or another. I think the main thing is to know that before you go into those markets. So, looking at attractiveness, and this is also available in the tool, you can also look at the relative attractiveness of countries to outside investment. I guess ideally here you'd be in that top left-hand quadrant, so low complexity and attractive to outside investment. Now, none of the three countries we've looked at here are falling in that quadrant, but I think it's fair to say South Africa and Poland would be closer to those than say Mexico. We can also look at injustice risk. That's a different perspective of looking at it, and I think here you would ideally be in the bottom left-hand corner, so low complexity and less personal risk. Again, South Africa and Poland probably closer than Mexico. Mexico will have, of course, other advantages. We ourselves have our own, one of our delivery centers in Costa Rica, for example. So Mexico is certainly a very viable scenario for some. The other angle just to sort of think about is, I suppose, what you might use an offshore center for. And this particularly looks at shared service centers, and there'll be some obvious categories here. So those first sort of three, that's very much your core kind of procurement through to accounts payable, accounts receivable, that type of activity. So sort of more on the financial end. Then you go into payroll. But then that sort of master data management and hire to retire, talent management, probably start to speak to your areas of expertise, but there are many others. And I think one of the advantages of establishing your own center is your ability to start to attack multiple areas over time. And in India, India's coined the language of capability center to try and move away a little bit from the view that India is purely an outsourcing destination. So trying to bring higher value activities to bear. I'm just going to take one example globally, and we've already seen some good population bubbles. This is a slightly different view. So this is looking at one domain area, which is software engineering, and here kind of ambers and reds means high density in terms of software engineering talent. There's probably no surprises. Certainly the sort of Southeast and East Asia scoring highly in terms of high density. When you then overlay cost, you then the picture changes a little bit. India's still highly dominant there, even with the cost arbitrage. So that may be a factor to bear into account when you're making your selections. What this tries to do is sort of pull a few things together. And again, this is focused on software engineering specifically, but it's looking at the size of the talent pool, the relative kind of cost arbitrage that you access from that, the depth and maturity of the capability, and then the ease of doing business. And obviously you're hearing about India repeatedly, and not a surprise to see India sat on top. But there's also some good other options there for other locations worth considering. So I'll just two more slides from me. One is just to have a think about what are the things that you should be thinking about if you're thinking about establishing your own footprint overseas. And the good news is there's lots of help available to answer these questions. But you would be thinking about what type of entity might I need. Typically countries like in the UK or any other market, there'll be various different legal structures that you can use. So deciding which one will be important. Location will also be important, and that will vary country to country. In some countries, that's more important. And so, for example, you might have the registered office of the company in one location, but be able to operate freely in another. In other countries, there may be more restrictions there. Of course, location in the end is going to be driven by, in this case, probably the depth of the talent pool and your ability to access it. Third area would be sort of shareholder and director implications in terms of it as you extend the kind of corporate governance footprint of the organization. What does that mean? Ease of setup, and I think ease and kind of the process to set up and making sure you understand that upfront. Equally, how easy to set up a bank account. Typically, setting up bank accounts all over the world takes a bit of effort because the local regulators need to do their checks as part of you setting up, and how you're going to fund that. Then there's bookkeeping, financial reporting requirements, and then audit. And in some countries, there are minimum thresholds for audit in terms of turnover, and others it starts from the first pound or dollar or whatever that you book. And then last but not least, clearly HR and labour law considerations. So there's and I think sometimes when you look at this, it might feel a little bit overwhelming. There's a lot to consider. In the end, you are extending your business into a new territory. So, there are some important questions there, but there's also, as I said, lots of help to help you through that. So time for one final QR code. So we produce country guides for 70 odd countries. These are freely available on our website. They're really good. They're not just sort of a couple of pages of marketing detail, but sort of 30, 40 pages, which will take you through the different legal structures that exist and key considerations in terms of things you'll need to be thinking about as you seek to operate in those markets. So feel free to download those. And with that, I will hand back to Stu. Thanks, Stu.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, obviously slightly different services versus QX Global. Julie, if you're ready to go, I think Baz is going to run your slides. And then after your session, we'll move on to some Q&A.
Great, thank you. Good morning, everybody. Are we ready to go, Baz? I can't see the screen, so I'm relying on you to tell me.
Yeah, so your intro slides up, Julie.
Good to go. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. I can't see the main screen, so I'm relying on you to tell me. I will let you know when we need to move on to the next slide, and hopefully it will all work swimmingly. So to start with, really just a very brief about myself. I've got over three decades recruitment experience. I started in recruitment for a fairly well-known high street company called Blue Arrow, and developed my career over the next 3 decades to eventually becoming a chief operations officer for a large healthcare business. And it was during that period that I first experienced offshoring. It was going pretty badly, and I was one of the negative people about offshoring. I have to admit that. But after a year of working with the teams, I became a firm advocate and eventually joined IMS in 2015 as an onshore advisor. And at that time, Akhilesh and myself were actually colleagues. So maybe a little known piece of information there, but we've known each other obviously for a long time. Going on to the next slide. A brief piece of information about IMS. It's a global workforce solutions company, and we specialize in supporting recruiters with offshore services and partnerships from our 3 delivery locations, 2 in India and the 3rd in the Philippines. We're currently working with over 250 recruitment companies, chiefly based in the UK, USA, APAC and Europe. And we're providing teams from a lifestyle business support of one resource right the way through to global MSPs with over 280 full-time equivalent resources. Next slide. IMS is actually formed of 5 companies now. The founding business when I first started with IMS was People Possible, which is our recruitment business. Then from that, as quite often happens, more businesses spawned. And so now we have 4 businesses that chiefly specialize in supporting recruitment companies. People Possible, as I mentioned, with recruitment and compliance solutions. Decimal with pay and bill and back office support services, accounting. DataWise is the kid on the block that isn't specifically specializing in recruitment, so I'm going to skip over DataWise for the moment. Enhance is our marketing arm, and Nuclei is IT support and development services. That was formed a couple of years ago and has actually assisted 3 of our clients so far to reduce their headcount footprint by introducing technological support over people. So despite the fact we're a people business, we do actually support our clients to reduce their headcount and apply technical solutions where it's feasible to do so. So next slide. So what's on the agenda? Well, Akhilesh and Ed have provided great insights to offshoring and outsourcing and the how-tos and all the kind of rationale. So for the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to be sharing my experience and perspectives on outsourcing with an emphasis on offshore, helping you to understand how to implement offshoring effectively with really practical insights to common mistakes that can cause an offshore initiative to falter or even worse fail, and that can be really costly, as some people have experienced and some people will know. So hopefully helping you to navigate away from those. And then following on with some clear basic actions that you can take to ensure if you do choose to offshore, that you can achieve the best possible outcome for your business. And it's obviously going to be a lot to cover in the time that we have. So for a more detailed insight, you can download our ebook, which I will give you the link to at the end. Or of course you can pull on the expertise of your panel here today. So between the people on this panel, I think we could probably support you in a lot of the requirements. So next slide, please. So common reasons why outsourcing offshore fails. Sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? But I'd rather get down to the nitty-gritty of, well, why does it happen? You know, how does it? So, because it doesn't always work. It's very much like even in recruitment, when those of us that have been to events and we say, oh, we work in recruitment, and somebody says, oh, I had a recruitment experience, and there's always going to be some experiences. So hopefully just giving you some of these insights will enable you to work with people like Ed, Akhilesh, myself to navigate through those and come out on top. So a clear purpose and strategy needs to be driven from the top, and it needs to be maintained consistently. It often will start well, but it can lose its intentionality over time as other distractions take focus. And the term out of sight, out of mind could have some effect on this. Because you've got remote workers that are not right in front of you, it can be quite easy to lose sight of what they're doing. But clearly, as with any new strategy, it's only as good as your commitment to it. So choosing the right model is also critical. And Akhilesh spoke about the different types of model, and I think Ed, you mentioned too, in his presentation. And these will range from a virtual assistant right the way through to a standard offshore FTE model, working with a partner to build, operate and transfer your model from outsourced to the final captive center option. So there's a variety of ways of going offshore, and create, if you've got the appetite to, creating your own solution. But it's important to understand what it is that you want to achieve and to be working with the right people and do the research initially to avoid the pitfalls of starting on the wrong foot. Unrealistic expectations will drive a negative experience. It's important to ensure that you request and take inputs from your offshore partner on this. An experienced partner will have a much better understanding on what's achievable, and if this is significantly different to your own perspective or actual benchmark results, further discussions need to take place to agree a way forward that everyone's aligned to. And I'll cover this in a little bit more detail during this presentation. We start getting into the tips. Seeing your offshore team as a transaction rather than investment will often drive dissatisfaction at the amount of time you and your current team will need to invest to ensure that their new teammates are provided with the necessary support that enables them to perform effectively in their new roles. And this can quickly move on to irritation. Why are the team asking me the same question again, and eventually become a breakdown? And it might sound like something very basic, but actually it can have a significant impact on the effectiveness of the solution itself and the adoption. The focus on price over value is a significant one. I hear so much about cost. It's one of the most common reasons that businesses decide, obviously, to offshore various processes or services, but it often becomes the main driver for selecting an offshore solution. And a virtual assistant, for example, will generally work from home and probably be the cheapest option available. It can be a really good solution for a lifestyle business or a sole trader, and that could cost maybe even up to 60% less than someone provided through an offshore business, where they work in an office supported by infrastructure, including training, leadership, and subject matter experts. But the value of the additional support, protection, extended infra, and peace of mind you'll receive from a partnership with tenure cannot be underestimated. But so often it's put as a priority during the selection process, but becomes almost like a sort of a device for, it almost becomes a mantra that we want to get it even cheaper than cheap. And I think that is the wrong way to look at it. It's about value. What value are you getting from your partnership with your offshore partner? What are they bringing to the table and supporting you with? Achieving and maintaining internal stakeholder enrollment can be really challenging, particularly if they feel threatened by their offshore colleagues. So a disgruntled employee can have significant impact on your plans, particularly where there's reliance on teamwork to achieve an outcome. So it's really important to foster an environment of collaboration and openness to enable you to navigate these breakdowns effectively. I've seen many situations where initially there's a resistance to the strategy, and once overcome, the partnership is a real joy. I mean, it really is a joy, and there's a real camaraderie between members of the team. But you know, not seeing that and dealing with that head on can have a significant and lasting impact. And finally, a lack of integration of systems, process, and people is fairly self-explanatory. An offshore team of any scale won't perform as well under those circumstances, and it's a transactional relationship that will not deliver best value and is limiting in its functionality. So let's have a look at a basic framework to getting outsourcing right. So next slide, please. No surprise that it sort of mirrors the last one, but really the clarity of outcomes and strategy is the critical piece at the very beginning, and clearly defining the outcome you require and clarifying the role that offshoring will play in its success is a great time to start engaging with your potential offshore partners. You've already seen that you've got, you know, access to people like Akhilesh, Ed, myself. There are lots of other potential providers out there, and it's really worth doing your homework and talking to these people. Talking to people doesn't cost anything more than really time as an initial intro, but it can have a massive impact on you know, where you decide to move and how you decide to do it. So you know, these exploratory conversations will also open up pathways to new or better opportunities for the business. So the interaction enables you to start a process of identifying the partner that best suits you, your team, and your business. And it is very much a relationship. You know, it's like anything, isn't it? We're all living with different partners because, you know, we're not all the same, and it's really important to choose a partnership that is a long-term partnership that really suits you and your team and your circumstances well. Having committed enrolled stakeholders is about ensuring a unified commitment to the success of the strategy from leadership and team members by creating the vision you've got for the business, what it means to and for them. Involving your team as much as possible in pulling together the strategy and supporting the development of the rollout and implementation plan is really critical and important, because many of the most successful offshore teams are as a result of consistent, clear and laser focus from senior leadership. And it doesn't stop when the team are embedded and performing in business as usual mode. There's a restless desire to keep up momentum, work in partnership on tech versus people development, as I mentioned earlier, and new initiatives to keep that partnership growing and developing, and that value being seen. And regular visits to work with your offshore partner can be a fundamental part of that. You know, there are a number of our clients who come out regularly to meet their teams, to spend time training with them, to go through a town hall, and all sorts of different ways of ensuring that, you know, these people, your offshore team, are not out of sight, out of mind, and they are a fundamental part of your success. So treating them with that kind of focus is essential to get the best out of it. Consistent, purposeful communication is obviously links in very well to that, and it's essential to ensure that everyone is on the same page. The most successful teams communicate and collaborate often, and generally it's you know, it's just about including your offshore team in the same kind of meetings as you would have onshore, such as a daily kickoff meeting, weekly and monthly performance and quarterly strategy reviews, recognition, acknowledgement, a town hall I mentioned earlier, and there to name but a few. But using teams as much as possible to bring people together to share and build relationships builds that sense of one team and belonging, and pays real dividends to the solution. I mentioned earlier about taking time to choose the right partner. It is critical to the success of your offshore strategy. assuming you start to engage with potential partners during that initial exploratory and strategy phase, there'll probably already be some emerging favourites, and it's worth acting on recommendations, taking up references as part of your selection process. You should expect your chosen partner to support you with your strategic initiatives and objectives and add real value as part of your wider leadership team. So check the resources that are available to you if you work with them, such as tech, subject matter experts, and where applicable, appropriately qualified leaders. Realistic expectations, setting those realistic expectations align with the complexity of the requirement you have and where you have them, internal benchmarks that you can broadly segment activities into 3 key buckets. There are task-based activities that can be set up really quickly and provide pretty much immediate impact. Generally, they are about saving money, saving cost. So quite often you hear the term lift and drop, where a solution that's working really well, a process that works really well, is lifted and dropped offshore to immediately save money, and those can be the impacts on those can be immediate. Then you have process-based activities. They'll take out segments, for example, or whole parts of a process, and these will usually need a bit more time to roll out. So they might be something like resourcing for jobs, for example. They'll take a little bit more time to roll out and get working effectively, and usually that will take you up to around 3 months to get that working really well and the pipeline rolling effectively. And then there are function-based activities where specialist teams will take on whole departments. And this, it may be that the whole rollout will take up to 6 months to fully implement, and for you to see the full and consistent return on your investment. I have got an example of this that I will send out with the full deck. I think Bagza will send out the full deck at the end of this webinar that will enable you to really look at what sits in those 3 particular areas so that you can start to think about your offshore solution. Your new offshore partner should work with you and your team to produce detailed implementation plans that are minimum equal to your internal induction standards, and these should include detailed process maps with protocols, escalation metrics, KPIs, review processes and templates where applicable. And it's important to ensure that there are clearly defined roles and responsibilities that are not duplicated by both on and offshore teams, such as both matching on the same job. It might sound daft, but it happens. And finally, here, as highlighted in the last slide, create opportunities to integrate your offshore team, foster that integration through regular team interactions, training, recognition and incentives. So pretty much there, final slide. I'm conscious that I'm running over time, which I didn't in my practice session, so I'm obviously talking slower. My concluding advice, I will on the next slide for key takeaways, Bagza. My concluding advice will be offshoring is a fantastic solution. I am obviously an advocate. It's my 10th year with IMS next year, so of course I love it. I know what it can do. It's a great opportunity to add real and sustainable value to your business, but it's essential not to get caught up in the hype. Acknowledge the real costs. Treat it as a long-term game. Customize. That's the key to make sure that it's completely focused on what you need for your business, and it isn't just a turnkey solution that very rarely works effectively. And maintain that accountability. Understand that offshoring doesn't absolve you of responsibility. You're still accountable for the collaboration and the performance of your offshore team. In terms of addressing problems proactively and internally, offshoring will not magically solve a problem. So don't offshore them. If you are looking to offshore it, it will take longer, and you'll probably need to work with your offshore partner in a lot more detail and a real strategy to identify what the issues are and work on them together. But I wouldn't advocate, if you want the faster return on investment, to offshore a problem. Equal treatment is, as we mentioned earlier, if you treat your offshore team with the same respect and value as your onshore team, recognizing their contributions, providing the support they need to succeed, then it will work well. And focusing on value versus obviously the cost, the initial base cost. So that was a really quick whip through. I could have done a lot more on that. Final slide is here. And, it will skip through really quickly. We do have a guide for implementing offshore services. So please click on the link and download the code and the book. And if you've got any questions, then don't hesitate to ask me. Thank you so much. Last slide, me saying thank you. And sorry, I ran over, guys.
Thank you, Julie. No, that's fine. You actually covered some of the stuff we were going to cover in Q&A as well, so that's fine. But
apologies.
No, it's good. No, that's fine. We've got 10 minutes. I'll keep the Q&A as punchy as possible. So first, I think the first question to Akelish, would you concur with Julie's comments around the timescale? So I think if it's not a lift and drop task-based service, we were looking at sort of 3 months for a significant process and then 6 months for something meatier. Is that realistic in terms of, for instance, if someone's outsourcing a chunk of their accounting team out to indifference, is that realistic timescale?
Yeah. So I think what Julie touched upon was mainly averages. So it actually changes from function to function, in my belief and my experience of last 15 years working with staffing businesses. The more transactional functions can get up to speed and mature in the process quite quickly in 3 months' time. But if you're talking about sales-driven processes like the roles of recruiters, they have a continuous learning journey and they constantly evolve and produce better and better results as they go through that maturity curve. So I think for a recruiter to optimize their productivity and performance and contribute to the gross margins, it can be all the way up to 12 to 18 months. But they become productive in 3-4 months' time, and they kind of start covering their costs. In 6 months' time, they probably start making a bit more margin in the top. But as they go on from there, their entire output and the return on investment actually starts to see the growth that anybody would want to see. Now, some admin functions like compliance might have a learning curve, but in 3-4 months' time, it gets up to a good speed and good level, and then matures through the process and becomes excellent service level. Pay and bill, we do a lot of pay and bill as well. So if the processes are right, systems are right, that is pretty quick. And I think those things might not even take 3 months in some cases.
Okay. I think what a lot of people want to know about location and what the trend is, and also just what your views are. So it's a two-pronged question, really. Just where do you see the trend in terms of locations at the moment? What's hot and what's not? But also linked to that is the importance of culture. My assumption, for instance, would be that culture is probably overplayed a bit, and that when it comes to back office function, if you're going to integrate that team into your onshore team, does it really matter whether that's India, whether that's South Africa or not? But maybe with clients, and when recruitment firms are trying to forecast what their clients are going to be happy with, then maybe they're thinking South Africa because it's the culture's closer to for instance the UK or US. But just if we start with you, Julie, on that, have you got any views on the cultural aspect first?
I am seeing, and I think we talked about this the other day, I'm seeing more of an interest in South Africa from UK and from US. The view is that South Africa, the language skills are get up and running quicker. But then with some of my clients who have a mixed portfolio, so they'll have some in India and some in South Africa, some of the experiences have been good and some have been not so good. So it's a mixed bag. And I think it's really, each culture has a different way of working, and it's really important to understand that. That's part of the initial learning curve, isn't it? You understand what makes them tick and what doesn't. I mean, if I look at my experience with India, for example, it's a pleasing culture. Everyone wants their clients to be happy. They want you to really like what they're doing. And sometimes that can actually be something that, if you're not aware of it, they can be over optimistic in some of the delivery aspects. And so it's that's critical. That's being quite critical. But once you know that, and you work with them and encourage them to be, you know, straight with you, it works. It actually works really well. But I think it's fostering that communication on their terms that's going to get the best out of them. Like anything, isn't it? If you work with people on their terms, you get the best out of them. The Philippines, very strong language skills, and you know, our North America and Asia Pacific region. It's a popular solution and support there. Interestingly, whereas in the Philippines, India has been less seen as, you know, not as attractive as the Philippines. It's actually our India team that's growing faster in the Philippines, in APAC than the Philippines teams. And I think a lot of that is depending on the solution. So where it's admin, very strong, you know, a focus on getting things done and getting things done efficiently. There, in my view, and this is just my view, there isn't better than India.
Ed, I'd put it to you, Ed. I think similar question, but also given your knowledge of India, when we say India as a location, are there different places people should be focused on within India?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes. Vast country. I started my career. I built the first capability center in Bangalore. That remains a key hub, but it is properly competitive on talent. So you need to have a very strong brand proposition. So India, you've got what are referred to as metro cities, so the larger cities. But I think for smaller businesses, quite often the tier 2 cities are just as interesting. So we've just set up quite recently a client down in Cochin in Kerala, and that was based on an analysis of a particular skill set around data scientists. So so there are the question, and you know, there are quite a few factors that kind of flow into that decision. But yeah, I mean, you've got the Delhis, the Bangalores, but also the Punes, the Hyderabad, the Jaipurs. You know, there are really quite a lot of options, and they are good, solid options as well.
At what point, I think to Ed and Akhilesh really quickly because we're running out of time, but what point in the process, and is it necessary for the clients to actually visit these locations? I suppose that, you know, Ed, to you first, at what point would someone have to actually venture out and spec out their locations and make those decisions?
Yeah, my view on this, whether in outsourcing or in other fields, is as soon as practically possible. Relationships are key. You know, we talked about culture. There's no right or wrong in culture. And actually you really getting to grips on understanding the differences in culture and helping work out how you work through those will be probably the critical success factor. Of course, cost and other things have to feature in there. But so my view would be get out early, but then expect to be there repeatedly on an ongoing basis. And on the timeline question that we touched on earlier, don't under-egg the timelines. Give it the time to succeed. You know, and the projects that are done quickly, in my experience, are the ones that don't stick. So.
And Akhilesh, you concur with that, I assume? I see Julie nodding as well.
So I believe if cost is not a problem, making a trip beforehand, before you initiate a partnership with someone, is going to be of real value, because if you go out, touch and feel, and see how people work, how different clients use the solution, I think that gives you a real sense of what it could look like when you do it yourself. If you don't do that, you can still have a tour of the facility virtually and can probably get an idea of what it could look like. But the real feel is the real feel, yeah. If cost is an issue and you don't want to commit to a cost like that before choosing a partner, I think once you have chosen a partner, it is very important that the visit is made right in the beginning. Right when you're forming the relationship, it is important that everybody involved, including those team members, build a sense of belonging to the brand they're going to work with. The idea is it should be seen as an extension of their business and not the provider's business. So I think it's very important right in the beginning if you're unable to go beforehand.
That's great. So, and I think we're running out of time, but we won't stop here. We go. The guys have agreed to contribute to a paper that APSCo will be putting out in the new year on this topic, and if needed, we'll do offshoring version 2 in the new year. But I just wanted to share. Actually, I had an extensive conversation with the CFO of one of well, he's a customer of one of you guys. I won't mention which because it'd be unfair. But it was just to say, he echoed a lot of Julie's points around the importance of treating the team as part of the team. Certainly made various visits. It did take time, I think, probably on the top end of some of the times that we mentioned today, but they've seen significant cost savings. You know, I think Achilles, you were talking about 30% to 60%, depending on which location. But they've had to invest in it. So I think the thing I'd like to sort of leave people with today was, one, cost savings is not, for me, the only driver, but at 30-60% is still significant. The talent access, the risk mitigation and the scalability that Achilles was talking about, I think particularly the talent access, this particular CFO has commented that training, hiring, retaining an accounts function in London is expensive and really challenging. They've kept one of their seniors there to manage the relationship, and then they've got the team now out in India. They've invested in that. They see it as a long-term play, and it's saving them money, and more importantly, it's as efficient, and they're part of the company. So I think it is, as you said, it's a commitment. You need to have those aims, as Julie mentioned, really clear. There's various places even within India to look at, and it's a big topic. So look, thanks very much for the panel today. Thanks for your contributions. I'm glad we squeezed in the 3 speakers today because there was a lot of content to cover. You know, with Ed's company doing TMF, doing something slightly different, and QX, I think IMS worked really well today. Thanks, really appreciate it. It's been lots of prep for today. Thank you, Baz, for organising everything. We'll be back in the new year with more on this topic, because I think in the current market and where the trend is to keep looking at offshoring and considering outsourcing as well. So thanks to everybody. Thanks for everyone that attended today, and all those accessing the recording. Hope you found it enjoyable and useful. And there'll be a lot of content and links coming your way, courtesy of Baz, over the next few days. Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Julie, Achilles, Ed. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
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 Thanks so much.